again. Trying hard, but you wanna be my friend. Ain't no place to hide, ain't no one to run to. Here we go again. Call my bluff, I'ma be here till the end. I'm the one you ride, I'm the one you ride to. If you don't wanna change, ain't no place to hide, ain't no one to run to. If you don't wanna change, I can help you out, 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 I can help you out. Here we go again. Time is up and I'm calling up my friends. Ain't no wonder why, ain't no wonder why. Here we go again. Call me up and you wanna be my friend.
What is up? Today is Friday, December the 6th, and it's a little after 7 o'clock. Shabbat Shalom to those of you who keep the Sabbath. And tonight I'm going to talk about, I have a lot of, I guess, technical news. You can see the thumbnail there, the AI hand and the human hand there. It says welcome to the future. So I have, a whole bunch of, I guess, articles have to do with kind of futurism type things. And as always, the number is scrolling on the bottom of the screen. If you guys want to call in there, and you can send articles. The email's also scrolling in the bottom of the screen. So I am going to get everything situated here, and I'll be right back shortly. All right. So, some of the articles I'm going to go over, fairly crazy. As you can see, the first one there, MIT says new technique lets you hack your own brain cells. First ever pig monkey chimeras born in Chinese lab. I had an article, not yesterday, I took yesterday off, I had some stuff going on, where I talked about the chimeras and the, the human crossbreeding with animals. It's something that's been going on for a long time in China. That's not, to me, this isn't anything new. It's maybe surprising to some people, but to me, this isn't really new. But I'm going to read the article anyways. It's interesting. So, U.S. suspected of using a ninja bomb missile with swords, which I think this is just absolutely crazy. I'll see if I can pull up a diagram. You guys can look at this also. It's literally a missile with swords that open up and kind of spin around. Nuts. Here's a warning. I give a lot of warnings out on technology, stuff that we have in our homes that we don't ever necessarily consider or think about. So there's a warning on the Echo or the Google Homes, and I'll read that. Some people have talked about this. Russian agents plan hit from assassins' lairs in French Alps. It totally reminds me of the Kingsman movie. So this, I had a video that said Homeland Security and facial recognition for U.S. citizens. They've actually changed their mind on that, or so they say. So Department of Homeland Security drops controversial facial recognition plan. I guess some of our senators, different people in the government, said that it would be a violation of our constitutional rights. So they're going to, or they're saying they're not going to allow it right now. So I'll read that article. A gene hacking company says it can slow your aging for $1 million. This is out of my state, Oklahoma. It says flu deaths climbed to 3 in Oklahoma, State Department reports. And this, so when it comes to 5G, and you know, I talk a lot about some of the different health effects this has on humans, or so that people think. They're not really releasing any of the I guess tests that they've done, but from what we can assume from having you know, smart meters on our houses and going through the TSA checkpoints and the radiation costs from this, you know, microwave technology, that it will. So like I always say, they sell it as a convenience, and in order to get it in more people's hands, then they just manipulate the prices. So they're going to sell cheaper phones so that they can get 5G into more people's hands whenever they do this rollout for 5G technology. This is an interesting article. What the hell are Ukrainian fascists doing in Hong Kong protest? Scariest predictions that might come true in 10 years. Putin fears US and NATO are militarizing space, and Russia has a right to worry, experts say. Ransomware attacks hit major US data center provider. We actually, one of the schools around the area I'm in Oklahoma, reported that they were attacked by ransomware, so it is a real thing. MIT says new technique to let you hack your own brainwaves will be the first article that I get into. So this is just crazy. It's more computer, just craziness we're getting into. I just thought that this article was interesting, but this is just some of the stuff. Like I always say, as we discover, these are some of the things that some of the discoveries that we're running into. So MIT says new technique lets you hack your brain waves. MIT researchers say they've taught test subjects how to manipulate their own alpha brain waves, thereby improving attention and given task. The key, give the participants live feedback of their brain activity. A study published Wednesday in the journal Neuron suggests the possibility of teaching people, particularly those with learning disabilities, how to improve their focus through neurofeedback. It says there's a lot of interest in using neurofeedback to try to help people with various brain disorders and behavioral problems, says Robert Desmond, director at MIT's McGovern Institute for Brain Research. Is completely non-invasive way of controlling and testing the role of different types of brain activity. I did this clear, didn't. All right. So the team of scientists found that by suppressing alpha waves in one half of their parietal cortex, the lobe responsible for touch, spatial sense, navigation, as well as attention, subjects were better able to pay attention to objects on the screen. The connection between attention and alpha waves has been established by previous studies. What wasn't clear until now, as the authors claim in an official statement, is whether the connection was a byproduct of different process, or if alpha waves directly control attention. In a clever experiment, participants were given live neurofeedback that described their alpha waves. They had to look at a grading pattern in the center of the monitor and were told to use mental effort to increase the pattern's contrast, thereby making it more visible. The contrast became more visible as the asymmetry of alpha waves in both the left and right hemisphere of the parietal cortex grew based on live data picked up by a brain activity monitor. In other words, the alpha waves were suppressed in one side while increasing in the other. One group learned how to suppress the alpha waves in their left and other in their right side of the brain. Both groups showed opposite results: more response or attention to flashes of light in the right and the left of the screen, respectively. Astonishingly, after 10 minutes of the exercise, the subjects learned how to increase the contrast, thereby increasing control over their attention. After the experiment, the subjects said they knew what they were controlling. They knew that they were controlling the contrast, but they didn't know how they did it. Lead author Yasmin, I'm not even trying to pronounce that, said in a statement, "We think the basis is conditional learning. Whenever you do a behavior or you receive a reward, you're reinforcing that behavior. Alpha manipulation really was controlling people's attention, even though they didn't have any clear understanding of how they were doing it," Desmond said. Some substantial questions remain, like how the subjects were controlling their alpha brain waves in the first place, and the team also doesn't know how long the effects of the brainwave manipulation last, despite some signs that the effects, quote, did seem to persist afterwards, according to Desmond. The scientists also don't know if the technique will actually be able to be applied to real-life scenarios, such as teaching people with behavioral problems how to improve attention. It's also unclear if the technique applies to other kinds of brain waves, such as beta waves, that have been linked to Parkinson's disease in the past. But at the same time, the experiment seems to demonstrate that we have a surprising degree of subconscious control over the mechanisms of our own brain. Oh, hey, what's up, Chuck? You have to check this article out, Chuck. It's MIT says technique lets you hack your own brainwaves. I thought it was interesting. Some of the some of the crazy technology stuff I talk about. But you might like this one. A first ever pig monkey chimeras born in Chinese lab. You might get a kick out of this, but if you follow conspiracy theories or are into any of that stuff, they've been talking about the Chinese have been creating chimeras in labs, or human pig embryo creation, weird stuff for the past decades. And we all know over in do or not, they probably do. Chuck asked, don't they fly F-117 fighter that way? They might. I'm not sure if they do or not. But yeah, if you follow anything with China, you also know that people that are dissidents to them or troublemakers or whatever, they pretty much just throw you in a van and you disappear, and then they harvest your organs. I read that in an article yesterday. People don't really believe that they do that over there, and they do that if they're not locking you up in a concentration camp. I don't know, Chuck. I'm gonna have to look that up about the F-117. That'd be interesting if that's how you drove it. I think that's how aliens drive their spacecrafts. It says, according to a new scientist exclusive, the first ever piglets with cells from monkeys have been born in a Chinese lab. I don't think it's the first. It says this is the first report of a full-term pig-monkey chimeras, Stakey Laboratory of Stem Cell and Reproductive Biology researcher Tang Hai, a co-author of the new paper about the birth, told the magazine. Yeah, well, to me, and I could do a whole video on what I think that number means that you just put there. Chuck says China 666. So the number of the that number of the beast, and his number is 606 or whatever. The Hebrew number for man is 6. So in the spirit that drives man, 3 parts of man, mind, body, and soul. Spirit that drives the man, what the man creates and what the man worships his creation. That's what that number is to me. It's what, at least in all this crap that we're creating, it's going to control us. There's the research. It says this is the researchers' final aim to grow human organs inside animals, but the future is still many years out. These particular piglets unfortunately died within a week of birth, but the exact cause of death is still unknown. Right, because you're mixing embryos together. Just to create the pig monkey chimeras, Hai and his team grew a monkey cell culture, derived embryonic stem cells from it, and then injected them into pig embryos 4 days after fertilization. Results leave something to be desired. Only 2 out of the 10 piglets turned out to be chimeras, and the team had to implant more than 4,000 embryos to get these results. Given the extremely low chimeric efficiency and the deaths of all the animals, I actually see this as fairly discouraging, stem cell biologist Paul Knopfler from the University of California, Davis, told New Scientist. The monkey cells and 2 of the chimeras were spread across a number of vital organs, but only represented a very low portion of cells, between 1 in 1,000 and 1 in 10,000, according to New Scientist. Crazy. To me, this is just crazy. I don't know. I keep try to keep all of the scriptures. I don't know, like getting pig organs inside of me, if that would fly. I mean, I don't know. So this is interesting, and I didn't even know that they had this until today, but I guess this is a thing over there. Chuck, you may have heard about this. Yeah, basically what I said about that, I can go ahead and talk about it now, since we're talking about it. My explanation, okay? So, man mocks God. We mock God in everything that we do. So my explanation for the number of the beast, or the beast system, we're living in a beast system already. We've created it. I do believe there's a false prophet. I think he's alive right now, and I think he runs the church over in Rome, and people may listen to this later on and get upset with me about it. I don't care. This is what I think. And that's from reading Daniel chapter 7. Is where I've gotten this. And then the number of man in Hebrew. So if you look that up, number of man in Hebrew is 6. Okay? So there's 3 parts of man. So we have mind, body, and soul. And then what we do, what we create, what we worship, and our intention. So we have a spirit that drives us. We create those things with the flesh. And then, we worship our own creation. I think man is the beast. There will be a man, the main man, who runs all of it, but it's just men worshiping ourselves. To me, it's just a whole pride thing. I just think it's men in our creation. 3 parts of man, 3 parts to the system. We've created the beast system, the monetary system, and we pretty much just worship ourselves. That's my point of view on it. I think we try to make it seem a lot harder than. Yeah. I think with so many interpretations when it comes to the scripture, I think that people just try to make it a lot harder than it is. But Satan mocks God, man mocks God. It's pretty simple. I mean, we tend to think of ourselves as gods if we're prideful. That's just my perspective. So check this out, and I have to find I can Google it. Right? Look at, so there's the bomb part, but I'm probably gonna get in trouble for saying that word on here. On December 10th, I'm probably gonna get the boot off here. But this thing actually has like swords that open up while it spins like a football, and it can cut through metal and material. And I guess we use this, and it's gotten some head dudes over there with it. But it says U.S. suspected of using ninja bomb, a missile with swords. This thing is crazy. You pull up the diagram. I'll probably pull it up here in a second. Matter of fact, I'll just pull it up right now. Since we're here. You gotta see the picture of this thing. Thing is insane. See if it gives me one of these pictures on this thing. I left Spreaker. I'm on Anchor now, which is on everything else. I don't know if I'll be able to find. Hang on. Because it goes on the Reaper drone. Oh yeah, this is kind of it right here. Look at this thing. It's got these blades that shoot out of it. And it just spins like a freaking, well, missile. But it just dices everything in its way. Apparently, people were mad because we're using this over there against our enemies, but this thing is lethal. Like, I just don't understand why you just don't, you know, use the missile. Why you gotta, like, chop them in a million pieces, but each their own. Oh, you want the link to my if you go into the easiest way to find it, go to my about section on my YouTube page, and it has all my has links to DLive, Twitch, Anchor. I don't think that I put Google and all that other stuff, but yeah, if you want to go on the Anchor, just go to my about section of my YouTube channel, and it has like the little Anchor emblem. You just click that, and it'll take you straight over to my all my podcasts are on there. I think I have like 24 episodes. So, it says U.S. suspected of using ninja bomb, rare missile packed with swords in Syria. It says the U.S. is the world's premier military power and isn't afraid to spend an absolutely obscene amount of money in order to maintain that distinction. According to Peter G. Peterson Foundation, that's a funny foundation name, America spends more on military affairs than China, Saudi Arabia, India, France, Russia, United Kingdom, and Germany combined. Yes, in 2018, we spent around $649 billion on defense compared to a measly $609 billion between the aforementioned countries. And that $649 billion accounted for about 15% of the federal budget. So, make of that what you will. While some of that spending is absolutely necessary, there's at least one thing that we can name that seems to be a bit excessive. How about a missile packed with swords called a ninja bomb? This is the craziest thing I ever heard of when I read this today. It says, though it sounds more like something out of an elementary school child would dream up than the world's most powerful defense force, America not only built this contraption, but used it, according to Business Insider. So there they are, putting it on a Reaper. It says on December 3rd, 2019, one, if not two, suspected, terrorists in northwestern Syria were killed in an unusual airstrike involving what was believed to have been the ninja bomb. Officially, it's the AGM-114R9X, as US-made Hellfire variant that relies on force and 6 extendable blades to take out its targets with greater precision and reduce civilian casualties. So I guess that's why they want to... Okay, I'll get it for you here in a second. Need to fix that then. I don't know why it does that. I'm getting the Anchor link real quick for Chuck, and I'll put it in the chat real quick for you. Oh, I think it's because I changed the name of my podcast is why it did. Well, I changed the link name of the podcast is why I did that. Because it was, when I first started, it was underneath my name, and that's probably why I did that. I have to go back and fix that. But thank you for finding that, Doug. I appreciate it. I would have never even known it. And I've been telling everybody to go look there, probably clicking it, and they can't get to it. It says, I think they will take people down slow, not a choke, but a slow boil fry. Are you referring to the choppy bomb here they have? What it seems like, what they're saying from this, I guess, is so that they don't kill a whole bunch of people behind them. That this bomb just goes in and pretty much chops up target. But they used it on a... Oh, you're welcome, Chuck. And if you don't want to call in, they have a feature on Anchor, and you can click and leave a message on there, and I can listen back to it later, or put it in, play it on the podcast, put it into the podcast or whatever. But all this audio goes on to the podcast later, so I stay up late and I record all that. Seems more people overseas listen to the podcast than people in this country. So it says when describing its effects on the minivan the passengers were riding in, VI stated the ninja bomb didn't explode, but rather it killed the vehicle's passengers by mashing and mincing everything in its path. Goodness. Oh, I got, yeah, because I say certain words on here, and you probably watch some guys that do this, kind of like I do this. But the deal is, I'm a lot older than some of those, well, I'm not a lot older, but I'm older than some of these younger cats, at least a decade older than them. So they got into this when streaming was relevant. I used to do this before streaming was popular or any of that crap. And we've been talking about this stuff for years, but you can't say certain words on this platform or they'll bog it down. Just things will happen. So I say the words, but I look at it this way. I'm reading news articles. I'm not promoting anything. I'm not talking about conspiracies. These are news articles that I read, so I don't really see what the issue is, but they may say it's a conspiracy or whatever, but all the major news networks can have the same videos, talk about the same stuff, and they don't get censored or kicked off the platform. I don't know. Maybe it's because, we're reading news that people don't, they just kind of put it out there and people just don't necessarily pay attention to it. The article goes on to say, while the debate about whether the U.S. has any business in sending dystopian death machines to foreign countries is a topic for another conversation. It says the missile's purpose of reducing civilian casualties is at least a little bit noble. And while a samurai would probably not approve of the ninja bomb, it is used in a bit more honorable than carpet bombing the entire block. I don't know. What do you think about it? So I always give these warnings out. I've warned. So there was a warning that recently came out about the cameras inside your television and the microphones inside your television, which I don't know why the hell you would want a camera and a microphone in your television in the first place. But people do it, I guess, if you have an app built in your television, since it's pretty much a computer. Yes. I agree with you 100%. Chuck says war sucks. I agree with you 100%. I think a lot of the time, well, I think, now I've never, my family's fought in wars. My ancestors fought in wars. What is that, that saying, if you want peace, prepare for war? But I think a lot of the time we go to war for just things that, materialistic things, commodities, and then we use other things as a, to perpetrate fear and get people believing that we have to do this. I don't think, I've lost friends overseas. I have friends that are still in the military, and I appreciate everything our military does and all of our veterans. I just think, the people that go to war or that tell us that we need to go to the war aren't necessarily as honest about why we're going to war all the time. I think sometimes that, and guys in the military are going to take the orders, and they're going to follow through with their orders. That's what they're done. Appreciate your service, Jeff. And he knows. I mean, he's saying it right here, and now you could see it on the screen. He says money wars, and that's another thing. And people don't realize this, and I guarantee Chuck knows about this. There's people that bid and benefit off of wars, that trade. If war happens, it's pretty much like trading on stock markets or certain things that materials they'll use in wars, and these people benefit off making money off these. Off of wars. It's what did who was it? I called it military industrial complex. Exactly what it is, and it's the elites that benefit off of it. While they sit in their ivory towers and they send out the troops to do their dirty work for them. I think it's a lot of times I think it's ridiculous. I appreciate everything the veterans do. My grandfather was a veteran. I have an older brother that's a veteran. I have friends I went to high school with that are veterans. I respect it. Just think we go to war for just some of the craziest crap in this world sometimes. And then later find out that we didn't have anything they were looking for. A lot of these conspiracies I can't get into because I'll for sure get a boot off here. So, like I was saying, I warned about TVs can be hacked. Your camera and your television can be hacked. Your microphone in your television can be hacked. I warn about this stuff all the time. I think I've warned, I warned about the Amazon Echo being able to be hacked with lasers. That was found out at the University of Massachusetts. And basically, they put a sound wave into a laser beam. They can send it across the room. There's a video on YouTube. You can watch it. This guy does it with the stuff he buys off Amazon. And he does it in his garage. They can do that, and they're using it to break into your house, and then they are, once they're in your house, or they can even use it to unlock your doors if you have your doors hooked up to it, your lights turned on, to open the garage door, all that stuff. So here's another warning. Like, the further we get along with this stuff, completely with what Chuck's saying. So, says the temptation to get a machine to turn your lights on for you is very strong. It said it makes you feel masterful and it saves you from having to get up from the sofa. Basically, the stuff's just making us lazier. So even the refrigerator, which I think this is a kind of good idea. So you can link your refrigerator to your smartphone and say you're at this store and you forgot to write something down on your list. They have a smartphone where you can go through and look inside of your refrigerator to make sure you got everything off your list. Pretty strange, but said there's a tiny catch about the Internet of Things. However, they may not be entirely secure. Please don't take my word for it. For devices like Amazon Echo and Google Home are the subject of this week's tech warnings from the feds. It says last week, as my colleague Jason Atten reported, it was smart TVs. This time, however, the Portland office of the feds has released a slightly nerve-affecting warning about, and then he goes on to say, I'll let the FBI itself delineate on the devices. It says digital assistants, smartwatches, fitness trackers, home security devices, thermostats, refrigerators, and even light bulbs are on the list to add that all of the fun stuff, remote controlled robots, games and gaming systems, interactive dolls, and talking stuffed animals. Well, the list seems endless. That endless isn't good when you consider all the possibilities, digital nooks and crannies into which nefarious beings might roam, thanks to this proliferation of devices. The feds put it like this. Hackers can use that innocent device to do a virtual drive-by on your digital life. Unsecured devices can allow hackers a path into your router, giving the bad guy access to everything else on your home network that you thought was secure. Are private pictures and passwords safely stored on your computer? Don't be so sure. I'm never sure about such things. I don't have an Amazon Echo or Google Home in every room, actually not in any room. I have one Apple HomePod, and Apple claims it would never ever compromise my privacy. The FBI offers several remedies for your potential digital calamity, and they're not all easily enacted. For example, change the device factory settings from default password. A simple internet search should tell you how. And if you can't find the information, consider moving on to another product. Then there's many connected devices are supported by mobile apps on your phone. These apps could be running in background and using default permissions that you never realized you approve. Know what kind of personal information those apps are collecting and say no to privilege requests that don't make sense. Says the FBI then offers a suggestion that a few may be in a position to fulfill. Secure your network. Your fridge and your laptop should not be on the same network. Keep your most private sensitive data on a separate system from your other Internet of Things devices. This likely means getting 2 separate routers. Does anyone other than a highly tech literate want to be involved in such maneuvers? My brother-in-law works for a tech industry and pretty much got all that stuff separated. I use a VPN as well. There's an option to dig into your router to see if others so-called micro-segmentation. This allows you to create separate virtual networks that run from the same router. Other option is to ask someone who knows about these things to investigate micro-segmentation for you. Far too often we're the authors of your own demise. Tech companies help us in this quest by thinking about security long after they thought about their profits. But if you really need to have these devices, don't say the FBI didn't warn you. I'm here. I pretty much warn about this stuff nonstop. If there's a new warning comes out, then I'll put it out there. This next article, and some other guys have already where did my thing go? Some other guys have already discussed this or talked about it. It says Russian agents planned hit from assassins' lairs in French Alps. This came out yesterday, so because I took off yesterday, I'm kind of covering a couple days here. There's a group of elite Russian military intelligence officers, including some of those who planned the poisoning of director in Britain, have been operating out of picturesque villages in the French Alps, Western intelligence officials tell NBC News. Confirming a report of France's Le Monde Daily that could have been ripped from the pages of a John Le Carre spy novel. The official said European and American intelligence agencies have been tracking up to 15 members of the Russian military intelligence agency known as the GRU, or GRU, who have lived for a time in France. Le Monde published what it said were the names of the officers, some of which had already been published by Bellingcat, an open-source investigative group. Le Monde reported that among the Russians who stayed in France's Haute Sauve department in the Alps were Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Borzhov, the alleged cover names of the two GRU agents accused of carrying out the attack in Skripal. French officials told the newspaper they considered the area to have been the unit's rear base for covert operations in Europe. It says it's good that our European partners are taking the Russians' threat so seriously, said Mark Polymeropoulos, a former senior CIA officer with expertise in Europe and Russia. Russia behaves at times like an outlaw regime, attempting to kill dissidents abroad and fomenting unrest in European democracies. It takes the sustained effort of European security services working together to counter this threat. This week, Germany expelled 2 Russian diplomats after authorities concluded Russian agents orchestrated an execution-style killing in Berlin of a 40-year-old Russian-Georgian citizen who had been designated as a terrorist by Moscow. The victim had fought with a Georgian unit defending South Ossetia during the 2008 Georgia-Russia war, and German prosecutors said in a statement. British authorities say Russian agents used a nerve agent in March 2018 to poison a former Russian spy, Sergei Skripal, as his daughter was also stricken. Both have since recovered. In September, the Crown Prosecution Service charged Russian GRU agents or officers who used the aliases Petrov and Borisov, I guess, with attempted murder, conspiracy, and possession of a nerve agent for the Skripal attack. In addition to the Skripals, the nerve agent harmed 3 others who come in contact with it, and one of them, Don Sturgis, died. Russia has denied involvement in the poisonings, and Russia officials have called the allegations propaganda. Emergency workers on the scene where a man and a woman were found in 2008 in critical condition at the Maltings Shopping Center in Salisbury, England. There's a picture there, but it didn't show. It says, given Europeans' open borders, Russian operatives don't have much problem getting in and out to undertake spying operations, intelligence officials say. What's notable about the revelations about the Alps base in the French is that the French authorities decided to make the information public. The FBI is tracking as many as 200 Russian operatives in the United States, current and former officials say, but some slipped through unnoticed, as was demonstrated by Special Counsel Robert Mueller's indictments accusing Russians of using social media propaganda to influence the 2016 election. The indictment said some of the defendants traveled to the U.S. under false pretense for, quote, the purposes of collecting intelligence, but their scheme was not discovered until much later. So I've talked about this. So I read the article on this when it first came out. Was the Department of Homeland Security was trying to get facial recognition software on every U.S. citizen going in and out of this country. Well, a bunch of, I guess, senators threw fits about it, and now it looks like the Department of Homeland Security is gonna drop it for now. But I guarantee after, whether Trump gets 4 more years or he's out after this, which I think he's gonna get 4 more. Either way this goes, whoever's next, if it is a some radicalized, Democrat socialist, I guarantee all this crap's going to be implemented. They're going to be tracking everybody. So just get ready for that one because it's coming. Department of Homeland Security drops controversial facial recognition plan. The Department of Homeland Security has backtracked on a plan to require every person, including U.S. citizens and green card holders, to submit to facial recognition screening before entering or leaving the country. Why it matters, it says facial recognition has emerged as a privacy flashpoint. As some cities pass bans on the technology, the federal government has pushed forward, but this reversal shows the limits of public appetite for its use. I don't like it. I don't use it on my phone. There's a guy that I watch on YouTube. His wife went to a convenience store, and the only way to get access to this convenience store is to look up at a camera, scan your face to allow you access into the store. And that is in Washington. I think that's insane. It says what's happening. It says 4 nationals are already photographed at the border to verify their identity, and U.S. citizens and permanent residents have been able to opt out of the process, but DHS recently proposed making the screening mandatory for all. Customs and Border Patrol confirmed to TechCrunch Thursday that the U.S. citizens will still be allowed to voluntarily participate in the biometrics entry and exit program. No thank you. But I think on the Real ID, they put scan your fingerprints and do all that crap with your face, and we all have to have it. If I'm in Oklahoma, we have to have it by October next year. It starts April next year. Us in Oregon were the last ones to comply with it because we were concerned about data breach. And now Department of Homeland Security says we got to figure it out, and they sent our senator a letter, and now we're having to conform to that as well. This is what they are saying. After the plan to expand facial recognition was revealed earlier this week, in the TechCrunch report, privacy advocates and government and civil societies raised an alarm. Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts said in a statement following the reversal, "This is a victory for every single American traveler who flies on a plane, and a reminder that we must remain vigilant protectors of our rights to privacy." But like I said, they do this, and listen to what Edward Snowden says. Whether you like him or you don't, listen to what he says. They hire corporations to do the spying for the government. The Constitution protects you against the government's infiltration against them, your Fourth Amendment, illegal search and seizures. So they get corporations to put it in your permissions or in the terms of service, and you just agree with it because you want the product. Sell it to you as convenience. You're okay with it. They change the terms of service, and then they use that to do crazy crap on your phones. Look through your stuff. It says what's next. Senator Chris Coons and Mike Lee of Utah put forward a bill last month that would require that law enforcement to get a warrant before using facial recognition technology. Do the old-fashioned way, man. So if you have $1 million lying around, like all of us here do, it says gene hacking company says it can slow your aging for $1 million. Reminds me of the, if you haven't seen the show on Netflix, Living With Yourself, go watch that show. It's hilarious. It has Paul Rudd in it, and this is kind of what this reminds me of. You wake up in the wilderness, tearing out of a plastic bag because they took your DNA and made a clone after you. This is what this sounds like. Reminded me of that show when I read it. A biotech firm called Libella Gene Therapeutics claimed that the genetic treatment is currently developing can reverse aging by as many as 20 years. For an eye-popping price of $1 million, the company will offer an experimental treatment to elderly customers that the company says will extend their telomeres, I guess, structures that sit at the end of our chromosomes like protective caps, but gradually shrink as we age. Libella uses gene hacking technology to introduce specific genes into patients. Tells that triggers a process through which telomeres are rebuilt. 10 reports. As the company extrapolates that doing so will freeze customers in time or even make them seem younger. I know I know what we're trying to do sounds like science fiction, but I believe it's a science reality. But experts in the field aren't convinced, saying that the company's business practices and scientific claims raise all sorts of red flags. Even though the company is based in the United States, they've managed to find a way to evade U.S. federal law by going to jurisdiction where it is easier to engage in this activity, University of Minnesota bioethicist Lee Turner told 1-0. Turner finds it particularly troubling that the biotech firm isn't running its anti-aging experiments through any major hospitals, choosing instead a low-key, out-of-the-way clinic. I think of this as a study where many things could go wrong, he told 1-0. That's what I'm saying. Go to Netflix. Watch that show, Living with Yourself. That's what it reminds me of. The dude like gets fed up with his life and goes and pays, I think it's $5,000 maybe, and it's like some crummy, ran down, looks like a nail salon in a shopping center, and then he wakes up in a trash bag in the woods, and then he goes to his house and he's got a clone living there. It's pretty funny. So this is out of my state. It says flu deaths climbed to 3 in Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State Health Department reports. I don't get the flu shot. Never had the flu. It says the number of flu deaths in the state has gone up from 3 since September 1st, and the Oklahoma State Department of Health reported. About 141 flu-related hospitalizations were reported since September 1st. The state health department said people of all ages have been hospitalized due to influenza, but the highest rate has occurred in people over the age of 50. Influenza is a highly contagious respiratory illness caused by a virus which is spread by infected people by coughing, sneezing, and touching a surface handled by others. Its impact can be severe in some cases, especially among seniors, young children, pregnant women, and people with underlying medical conditions, according to the CDC. So the CDC states the best way to prevent the flu is to get one of their wonderful thimerosal shots, thimerosal, aka mercury. The OSDH recommends staying home for at least 24 hours after the fever is gone. Avoid going to work, school, social events, and public gatherings, as well as traveling and shopping. The fever should be gone without the use of fever-reducing medicine, such as acetaminophen, before returning to regular routine. To prevent the spread of flu, the public is reminded to cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue and wash hands often. I'm not getting one of those shots. I talked about this earlier because you can't use the new network that's coming out that's going to roast your insides unless you have a phone that works on the network. So what Sprint is doing is they're actually making cheap 5G phones just so they can get it into everybody's hand. That's what this article is about. It says Sprint will launch sub $500 cheap $500 5G phones next year, and is looking to adding new names to its portfolio of device makers. Sprint VP of Product Engineering Ryan Sullivan said here at Qualcomm's Snapdragon Tech Summit. Sprint's stuck in a bit of a sliding doors future situation right now. With this merger with T-Mobile stuck in the courts, it can't clearly say that it's going forward as an independent carrier or as part of the new T-Mobile. But Sullivan still has plans to bring down prices and welcome new manufacturers into its portfolio. We will launch 5G phones in the $300 to $500 price range this year, Sullivan said. Who's providing them? Sullivan wouldn't give any specific names, but the words Nokia, Motorola, and even, I don't know what that one is, Xiaomi, came up in the conversation. We meet with HMD at every trade show, and we're always talking about Nokia portfolio devices. I've been working with Xiaomi, I guess, since back in Hugo Barra was on product for them. And we know all these guys. We talk to all these guys. It's all about finding the right timing and the right value proposition, he said. Qualcomm's prepackaged Snapdragon 865 and 765 models are looking to make developing 5G phones cheaper and easier. As I reported yesterday, and Sprint is working to pre-certify both of them, Sullivan said. While that won't entirely let phone makers avoid carrier certification, it will make the process more streamlined, he said. We could see the entrance into the portfolio. We could see new brands. We have one phone with OnePlus and could see more next year. And the other thing that could happen is that you could see the traditional OEMs that are only serving our prepaid base. You could start to see them make their way back into the postpaid portfolio because of things like modules. So it says Sprint has struck with the 9 5G markets and announced earlier this year, but it's been expanding coverage into those cities, and it now covers 16 million people, and it's been expanding spectrum usage too. Sprint owns 160 to 190 megahertz of prime Midland spectrum in much of the country, but it's only using 120 megahertz. Even that's up when its 5G network started. In some cities, such as New York, is using 60 megahertz for 4G and only 40 megahertz for 5G. That's up to 60/60 in all out of 9 markets, Sullivan said, offering improved 5G speeds. It also moved uploads of 5G, improving upload speeds. So what about the other 40 to 70 megahertz that could double Sprint's 5G speeds from what we're seeing now? The problem is the hardware availability. We're working with our network manufacturers, and they can actually produce massive MIMO radio head upgrade that can actually support more than 60 megahertz. So its limitation, he said, ultimately getting 100 megahertz or more than the NR 5G side or total goal. So I just really want to read this article because, not that, I mean, I don't have $500 to go out and spend on a new phone, but they're gonna try to get it in everybody's hands. That's just what they do. And if they gotta, lower the price, supply and demand. So this article says, what the hell are Ukrainian fascists doing in Hong Kong protest? So Hong Kong pro-democracy activists are initially welcoming to blurry young Ukrainians who arrived in front lines of their protest Sunday. Then they noticed the Swazi tattoos. In a photo that swiftly circulated on social media, it was clear that the visitors' political allegiances were radically incompatible with Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement. One of the men had 2 swastikas tattooed behind his ear, while another had white power symbol 1488 tattooed on his shoulders and his initials WPSH, which you can see what that is, across his stomach. So what I was going to say, I'm not going to read all this because I don't agree with this ideology whatsoever. So you got Ukrainian fascist white supremacists who are invading the actual Hong Kong protest. I don't know if this is, obviously to stir the pot, but if these dudes are going over there with this crap, they got to keep out of it, because the people, I believe, in Hong Kong that are protesting against the government may have good intention. They may be going at it in the wrong ways, but they may have good intention. But this is not adding to it's not making any better what they're trying to do over there. So whoever these asshats are, go back to Ukraine and do whatever you do over there. You don't need to be getting involved in what these people are fighting for over there. You're going to make it a lot worse for them. The scariest predictions that may come true in 10 years. And a lot of this stuff I talk about anyways, but I think it's funny. This stuff is starting to get like the mainstream. But yeah, you can see him looking at that little globe there. This is the future is scary. Anything can happen, and humanity may not be prepared for it as a species or as a society. Look at all the sci-fi films of the several decades warning about what could go wrong if a killer Arnold Schwarzenegger robot time travels back to the 80s, or if a bunch of machines put Keanu Reeves in virtual reality. While those particular examples are unlikely now, there are some things that could potentially happen in the next decade that would thrust humans into uncharted territory, leaving us all to sink or swim. Climate change is probably the biggest modern example of this. But the climate is always changing. This is what you youngsters that are getting manipulated into thinking all this stuff. The Earth's climate always changes. Whether we're here or we're not here, it's always changing. Okay? It's unclear what will happen exactly, but you know that it probably won't be good. There are other things looming on the horizon, though they are just out of reach right now. But the coming, much like Arnold Schwarzenegger Killer Robot of the future, and if you're not ready for them, who knows what might happen. So these are just some of the crazy, I guess you could say, conspiracy type things that are happening. It says killer robots are coming. Some of this stuff I can just imagine like really happening, but right now there are drones, remotely piloted vehicles that can use in warfare. And there's a bottleneck. There's a bottleneck there that militaries across the world are eager to remove, though the human pilot. This human needs things like food and sleep and can generally only control a single vehicle at a time. This can be surpassed by the use of laws or lethal autonomous weapons, as reported by Vox. Laws are like drones, but are completely piloted by AI and require no human intervention. Most important, it is the L in the name, lethal. It says laws are authorized to kill without human oversight. This may not sound like an awful idea on paper. Instead of sending humans to fight wars, we would basically be fighting robot contests. No humans are hurt, right? Unfortunately, it's not that simple. For one thing, once the enemy's robot army is destroyed, the humans would be next, and there's always the chance of collateral damage. The biggest problem with laws come from what-if scenarios. What if they get hacked? What if a bug in their programming causes them to attack the wrong targets? What if a rogue nation or terrorist group gets their hands on them? And scariest of all, what if an army of laws are programmed to commit genocide? If any of these things did occur, would we be able to stop them? Smart homes will be hacked, and this is already happening, so, because I have an article on ransomware that's coming up. It says ransomware has become a big thing. These malicious programs take over a computer, often threatening to delete or encrypt files, and then demand the user pay money in order to reverse the encryption or prevent the deletion. Imagine having years of worker-sensitive files potentially be lost or stolen unless you fork over large sums of cash. Now imagine this happening with your smart home. The so-called Internet of Things has made life very convenient in some ways, but it introduces a whole new world of potential downsides. According to The Economist, smart homes are the very lucrative future for malware and hacking. Say you buy a fancy new smart oven, but it comes compromised. You effectively no longer have that oven in your house, which would make cooking and thus life extremely difficult. Your choices may end up being buying a new oven or paying the ransom if your smart air conditioner gets infiltrated in the middle of a heat wave. Similarly, cars are getting smarter now too. If your sweet new car gets hacked, you're looking at the possibility of thousands of dollars lost in seconds. And while manufacturers can add safeguards, no system is impenetrable. Damaged cars can often be fixed, but if you buy a car with a fatal flaw in its security, a hacker or a piece of malware could effectively, quote, total the whole line of vehicles by bricking them. Base debris could wipe out satellites. This is a real threat, because if we get communication satellites knocked out, whether it be through a coronal mass ejection or electromagnetic pulse, whatever it may be, then we're so reliant on those satellites, we would be screwed. People rely on satellites more than ever, even in an era when satellite television and other obvious uses for the tech are in the decline. There are hundreds of other ways you are using them without even knowing it. GPS is a big one, but even the basic communication systems often rely heavily on satellites. Without those helpful floating machines in Earth's orbit, you suddenly lose a whole lot of things that you depend on every day. New satellites are constantly being launched, but the old ones are slow to be decommissioned or otherwise cleaned up. This leads to a buildup of what's known as orbital debris, and according to The Verge, this is starting to become a big concern. If you remember 2013 movie Gravity with Sandra Bullock, she plays a NASA astronaut who is working on the Hubble space telescope when a missile strike on an old satellite causes a chain reaction of debris flying through orbit. This scenario wasn't made up for the film. It's a real thing called the Kessler syndrome. So automation will continue to affect employment. This is true. There's actually statistics on how many jobs could be lost in the future due to AI. So throughout the last century, humanity has made machines that make jobs easier, but at the cost of employment. A classic example of this, horse buggy manufacturers. Once cars became common, that industry dried up and was no longer necessary for people to get around. Improvements in workflows caused more jobs becoming unnecessary, and it's not always possible to replace them. In 2005's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Charlie's father is laid off from his job, putting caps on toothpaste tubes and replaced by a machine. At the end of the film, he gets a new job servicing the machine that took his job. So it's a happy ending, except that there were several other employees who did the same work, and only a fraction of the employees were needed to service the machine. They might not even have the proper skills, training to work on the machine like Charlie's dad did. Surveillance. Seeing all this, the reason I'm reading this article is because these articles, I've been reading all this stuff that they're introducing into our future this whole last week and the week before that. Pretty much all my videos talk about all of this stuff. All of this stuff is already happening. I've talked about, this says surveillance will get even creepier. There's a guy who wants to have drones that predict pre-crime, kind of like in Minority Report, that just fly around, or in the movie Upgrade, or the Matt Damon movie that's out there. They're already doing this stuff, and this article is like 10 years in the future, I think is what it says. Yeah, true in 10 years. A lot of this stuff is already happening. The robots, obviously, drones. Smart homes will be hacked. I just read an article that Alexa could be hacked with laser beams. This one, I think this is going to come out. I mean, if you want to get at your enemy, you knock out their communications first. Everybody knows that. Automation will continue to affect unemployment. We know that's a statistic that's going to come to fruition here shortly in the future. I think less than 10 years. And now surveillance is going to get even creepier. So we already know they want to, like in China, if you buy a new phone and you sign a contract with a phone agency, you have to register your face in order to operate the phone in a new phone number. They were trying to introduce here in the United States face scans for going in and out of the country for its own U.S. citizens. We are getting the Real ID Act. Everybody by the end of October next year has to have a real ID. It will get weirder. But it says surveillance has become a daily part of life, with cameras following you in public and digital breadcrumbs showing what people do and consume every day. But things are likely to get even scarier in the near future. As noted by The Verge, AI is going to be a game changer in the world of surveillance. Now, not only will technology be able to track you every step of your life, but there will also be AI collating it all without human oversight. What this means is that you will have the data and processing power to effectively watch a person 24 hours a day, and all without the need for a human to examine the data. As noted by TechCrunch, the future of privacy will likely be less about preventing surveillance and more about users consenting to how their data is used. As an example, police in Chicago recently announced a partnership with Ring, and I've talked about this too. A lot of us talk about it. There's other guys that do this stuff that talk about the same thing. So Ring manufacture video doorbells whereby authorities can request access to videos from citizens' devices. You can download the app. It's called Neighbors or whatever it is. I used to have it on my phone. I was like, hell no, I don't want this anymore. Where they found out that police departments all over the country were going through or using a backdoor contract with Ring to where they could access video footage from people's private devices on the house. But if you have the Neighbors app, it does that automatically. And anytime there's a ding on somebody's doorbell or camera picks something up, you're alerted for it on your phone. And I could be here and that happened all the way across town. So maybe it's good here in Chicago because the crime rate's so high. I mean, maybe it might be beneficial there, but I just think the other thing that they were talking about is that they wanted to introduce facial recognition software into the Ring software where it would just scan people's faces if they show up at your door, and if that person has outstanding warrants for their arrest. Now you're seeing why they want to get facial recognition software, the face scans, into the system so that they can run crap like this, scan the face, check you for warrants, and your doorbell's ratting on people, so you don't got to call 911 anymore. Your AI all around you is telling on everyone around you, including yourself. It says whereby authorities can request access to videos from citizens' devices. It says the data is being collected regardless, but the owner has to agree to it being used by police. Whether this model is the future of privacy is anyone's guess at this point, much less whether or not average people will accept it. But full, around-the-clock surveillance for everyone is very likely a possibility in the near future. I most definitely think it will be. The deepfake thing, there's a new one out, as a matter of fact. You guys should go watch that. It's, I think it's from Trump, and he says, they make him say Epstein didn't kill himself. So you guys should go look that one up. Deepfakes will make it possible to tell it's real. Yes. There's an awesome Keanu Reeves stopping a convenience store robbery one. That's pretty awesome. You guys should go check that one out. Everyone, if you don't know what a deepfake is, you should know what a deepfake is by now, especially from this video. I'm not going to play it, but you should at least know from that. Genetically modified viruses could wipe humanity out. This I do believe is a possibility. It says, while humans wiped out a great many communicable illnesses over the last century thanks to inoculations and better health practices, it is possible that some of these past diseases might come back to haunt us with the introduction of genetic editing tools like CRISPR, which is what I was talking about. Changing gene editing is what CRISPR does. Humanity is moving into an era where it can customize medicine to an individual person, matching treatment directly to their genes. However, scientists are beginning to worry about the opposite, genetically modified viruses that are made to be more lethal. Samples of eradicated deadly viruses often still exist, and with the right tools and knowledge, it is becoming more and more possible that a malicious actor could modify those to bring them back. The genetic code for many old viruses is actually readily available online. Reverse engineering these to create a new superbug would take some time and effort, but it could be done. What's more, it's even possible to create brand new viruses from scratch using these tools. With enough skill, there might be something akin to this super flu from the stand being made in an enemy's nation government-sponsored lab in the next few years, according to Newsweek. These viruses could even be tailored to only attack certain targets like people with red hair or only males, making them effective for genocide. Crazy. The end of antibiotics, I believe that this is coming up because some of the diseases and stuff we're getting, I read about an article a few videos back where it discussed antibiotics aren't even touching half this crap out here anymore. Says antibiotics have been a cornerstone of health, but in recent years, doctors have begun discovering antibiotic-resistant illnesses. At first, there were only a few, but now more and more diseases are developing an immunity. So far, the response has been to encourage people to take their full course of antibiotics instead of stopping when they feel better, according to NBC News. This is only slowing things down, though. There will eventually come a time that antibiotics are no longer effective. What will a post-antibiotic world look like? It's not entirely clear just yet, but it would be more than just not being able to get medicine for basic illnesses and infections. Humans could lose the ability to perform surgery, as doctors would be unable to fight off an infection after the procedure, according to The Guardian. There are other possible antibiotics out there, medicines that kill infections, bacteria, or viruses, but don't destroy human tissue. But even if they were discovered tomorrow, it would take even years of testing and development before they could be widely used. So, the internet may break apart. I mean, there's a whole, which is already happening. Russia's trying to separate themselves from this. AI can enable a whole new era of scams. It says, with the rise of the internet, came an all-new form of confidence. Tricksters full of schemes repurposed for the World Wide Web. Now, thanks to spam filters and better knowledge, these cons aren't quite as effective as they used to be, but you might see the next evolution of scams coming very soon. Since controversial AI learns examining human conversations, scientist and sci-fi author David Brin has an eerie prediction. Eventually, AI would know enough about human interaction to be able to manipulate humans. Yes, I think that'll happen. Brin calls them lairs, or human interaction empathetic robots. If you have an Amazon Echo, then you know now that she has emotion when you talk to her. She has emotion in her voice now. And then if they study the way that humans do things, because that's how she builds her, and a point because I have one over here. That's how she builds her knowledge or our talking patterns. She adjusts to me personally. Is she just listens to me interact with other people, my wife, when I'm talking on the phone, whatever it may be, and that's how they gain knowledge, basically. These would be AI and eventually robots that could mimic a human well enough to exploit other natural empathy, well enough to get people to do basically anything. 2014 film Ex Machina demonstrates this exactly. So, says the heirs could eventually become scammers, yes, but they could also become charismatic cult leaders, or possibly even spread manipulative political ideas or take advantage of humans in ways that might be difficult or impossible for other humans to be able to pull off. Alright, good night, Chuck. You have a good night. It said AI could be trained to be biased. In 2016, Microsoft launched a Twitter chat bot named Tay, described as a machine learning experiment. Tay could receive tweets from anyone, and it would craft a reply in response based on what is learned from talking to others. You can imagine where this went. In less than 24 hours, Microsoft took Tay offline because strangers on Twitter taught it to reply with horribly offensive, racist, and sexist statements, even to comply in conscious tweets, according to Gizmodo. The problem with machine learning is that it often learns from humans who have biases and unchecked beliefs of their own. For example, many face recognition apps have trouble distinguishing non-white faces because they often experience very few during development, according to Time. Since facial recognition AI isn't trained on dark-skinned faces, it's less able to recognize them and may not even recognize people of color at all. While the Tay incident shows that it is clearly pretty easy to maliciously teach an AI awful things, it also is possible that humans can unintentionally train AI to share our ingrained biases or discrimination. Police robots and AI are already in development, but police departments across the world are under increased scrutiny regarding discrimination. Imagine AI trained during the NYPD's stop and frisk days and how much work might be required to undo that. That's called AI discrimination, and as long as machines learn from flawed humans, it's something people need to be very careful of. There's another one, endless corporate cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are still in their infancy, with prices rapidly fluctuating and little widespread knowledge about them. While they're hot in the tech industry for those outside of it, cryptocurrency is still a mystery. But the underlying technology is extremely appealing to big tech companies who are beginning to take notice. So I think that'll be a possibility. I did a video on could Bitcoin, but in general, could cryptocurrency be the one world currency? The Federal Reserve was in talks. I don't know if they're still in talks, but the Federal Reserve is in talks about creating their own cryptocurrency. It could be a possibility. You never know. Cool. It says Putin fears the US and NATO are militarizing space, and Russia is right to worry, experts. So, it says NATO and the US and Russia have a new domain to complete in conflict over, and it's space. Russian President Vladimir Putin warned Wednesday that the U.S. saw space as, quote, theater of military operations, and that the development of the U.S. Space Force posed a threat to Russia. U.S. military political leadership openly considered space as a military theater and plans to conduct operations there. Putin said that at a meeting with defense officials in Sochi, according to a Russian news agency TASS. For preserving strategic supremacy in the field, the United States is accelerating creation of its space forces, which are already in the process of operative preparations, Putin said, adding that the world's leading countries are fast-tracking the development of modern military space systems and dual-purpose satellites, and that Russia needed to do the same. The situation requires us to pay increased attention to strengthening the orbital group as well as the rocket and space industry as a whole. Russia opposed the militarization of space, Putin insisted, but said at the same time, the march of events required greater attention to strengthening the orbital group and the space rocket and missile industry in general. So NATO too. Putin's comments Wednesday reiterated those he made in late November to his Secretary Council, in which he said was seriously concerned about NATO's attempts to militarize space or outer space. The comment came after NATO had declared space a fifth operational domain for the military alliance alongside air, land, sea, and cyber. Space is a part of our daily life here on Earth. It can be used for peaceful purposes, but it can also be used aggressively, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said at a meeting of foreign ministers on November 20th. That dude is in a lot of articles I read. Satellites can be jammed, hacked, or weaponized. Anti-satellite weapons could cripple communications and other services our societies rely on, such as air travel, weather forecasts, or banking, he said. Space is also essential to the alliance, deterrence, and defense, Stoltenberg added, referencing the organization's ability to navigate, to gather intelligence, and to detect missile launches. Making space an operational domain will help us ensure all aspects are taken into account to ensure the success of our missions, he said. For instance, this can allow NATO planners to make requests for allies to provide capabilities and services such as satellites, communications, and data imagery. He said that around 2,000 satellites currently orbit the Earth, with around half of them owned by NATO countries. Stoltenberg insisted that NATO has no intention to put weapons in space, and we are a defensive alliance. He added the alliance's approach to space will remain fully in line with international law. The 1976 Outer Space Treaty is a global agreement considered a foundational stone of international space law. The treaty was first signed by the UK, US, and then Soviet Union at the height of the Cold War to promote the peaceful exploration of space. It banned the placing of nuclear weapons in space and limited the use of the moon and other celestial bodies to peaceful purposes only. It also established that space shall be free for exploration and used by all nations, but that no nation may claim sovereignty on any part of it. So Star Wars, and this will probably go into what Star Wars, it's going to talk about Star Wars, the missile defense system under President Ronald Reagan. A lot of people don't even know we have this. So, there are other space treaties covering, for example, the rescue of astronauts, the moon, the International Space Station, and the liability for damage caused by space objects. Still, the use of space for defensive activities is likely to be litigious and proactive territory. It's not the first time that space has been seen as a potential realm for defense, though, especially during the Cold War. The Strategic Defense Initiative was a program first initiated in 1983 under President Ronald Reagan, and the aim of the program was to develop an anti-ballistic missile system that was designed to shoot down nuclear missiles in space, with potential missile attacks from the Soviet Union specifically in mind. It was dubbed Star Wars because it envisaged that technologies like space-based X-ray lasers could be used as part of the defense system, and funding shortages as well as the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 meant that the SDI was never built. The idea of space dominance and defense has gained more traction to recent years, however, and in 2018, President Donald Trump floated the idea of developing another military branch, the quote, Space Force, and I think it's Space Command. which we've had one, and you guys think it's funny, but I've showed paperwork. In 1996, Space Force was actually coined under declassified military paperwork. It's accessible to anybody. You can look it up. That word was coined in 1996. It's ran by the Air Force. It's just only become a thing since he became president, and it's not Space Force anymore, but it's ran by the Air Force, and it's called Space Command now. They unfurled the flag and all that stuff at the White House. You can even watch that. He said the idea of the Space Force has started as a joke, but then he decided it was a great idea. Like I said, it came out in 1996. It wasn't even, it was way before him. Space is a war-fighting domain, just like the land, air, and sea, Trump said, and we have the Space Force, or the Air Force will have the Space Force in June of 2018. He ordered the Pentagon to begin the creation of a new branch. We've already had it. It's not new. But here's the thing. With the articles that I read in another video, they have this, but it's used along with the new technology in Project Bluebeam to shoot, to project holograms from whether they're, you know, UAV, spacecrafts, drones, whatever, project images of a fleet of other drones or aircraft. So it's all in the paperwork. You can look up all that. That's old. It's an old term. At the start of 2019, the U.S. unveiled an overhaul of its missile defense program, the Missile Defense Review, in which it stated the need for a comprehensive approach to missile defense against rogue state and regional missile threat. The review also recognized space is a new war-fighting domain, with the Space Force leading the way, and it said would ensure American dominance in space. In a speech presenting more detail on the Missile Defense Review, Trump said the U.S. would invest in a space-based missile defense layer. It's new technology. It's ultimately going to be very, very big part of our defense, and obviously our offense, he said. U.S. Air Force Space Command General John J. Raymond stands next to the flag. There's a picture of it on there. It says, the system will be monitored, and we will terminate any missile launches from hostile powers or even from powers that make a mistake. It won't happen again. Regardless of the missile type or the geographic origins of the attack, we will ensure that enemy missiles find no sanctuary on Earth or in the skies above. Says arms race in space. Russia responded angrily to the comment, saying it was a tantamount to the U.S. relaunching the Cold War era, quote, Star Wars program, according to the statement from Russia Foreign Ministry, reported by Reuters. Russia condemned the strategy as an act of confrontation and urged Washington to reconsider its plans. The strategy de facto gives the green light to the prospect of bashing missile strike capabilities in space, the statement said. Implementation of these ideas will inevitably lead to the start of an arms race in space, which will have the most negative consequences for all international security and stability, it said. We would like to call on the U.S. administration to think again and walk away from the irresponsible attempt to relaunch on a new and more high-tech basis the still remember Reagan-era Star Wars program, it said, Reuters reported. Experts say Russia is wary of the U.S. and NATO opening a new operational frontier in space, as Russia would be easily competed by the combined NATO countries' technological expertise, advances, and weaponry in space. I said this a long time ago, before Space Force was even a thing. They're gonna fight over. They'll never finish fighting over the ground beneath us, but the next war will be over territory in the heavens, guys. That'll be it over. They gotta fight over something. I think this is the last article, to be honest. So ransomware attack hits major U.S. data center provider. Osiris-1, one of the biggest data center providers in the US, has suffered a ransomware attack, ZDNet has learned. In an email after the article's publication, a Osiris-1 spokesperson confirmed the incident and said that they are currently working on a new law enforcement and forensics firms to investigate the attack and help customers restore impacted systems. 6 of our managed service customers located primarily in New York data center have experienced availability issues due to a ransomware program encrypting certain devices in their network, Osiris-1 told ZDNet. Our data centers colocation services, including IX and IP network services, are not involved in the incident. Our investigation is ongoing, and we are working closely with third-party experts to address this matter, the company said. Another Evil attack. It says, according to details ZDNet received in a tip, the incident took place yesterday and was caused by a version of the Evil ransomware, or whatever this name's. Obviously, what the feds were warning us about in another article I read about ransomware that was coming through apps and everything else. This is the same ransomware family that hit several managed service providers in June, over 20 Texas local governments in early August, and 400 plus U.S. dentist office in late August. According to a copy of the ransomware note, this was targeted attack against the company's network. The point of entry is currently unknown. One of the 6 customers impacted by the ransomware infection is FIA Tech, a financial and brokerage firm. And tech ransomware caused an outage of FIA Tech cloud services. In a message to customers, FIA Tech said the attack was focused on disrupting operations in an attempt to obtain a ransom from our data center provider. FIA Tech did not name the data center provider, but the quick search identifies it as Osiris-1. I mean, I'm not going to go completely into all this, but pretty much the So, as always, any of the articles, if you guys watch this video later, any of the articles that I talk about, I always put the links in the descriptions on these and also on the podcast. You guys can listen to this on Anchor, and thanks to everyone that listens to the podcast on Anchor. There's other countries that listen, so I appreciate all that. All links in the description. As this builds up, hopefully more people will call in and want to talk about some of this stuff, and you can always send links to the go over there to that email address, kingsmanreport2019@gmail.com. You can send those there. Through Hangouts, the fastest way to get them to me, or that email address if it's during the day. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. Feel free to share the video. Like the video if you like it, and then if you want to subscribe to the channel. I mainly talk about stuff that's coming in the future, or as you can see in the news everyone ignores. So this is just a lot of news that gets overlooked. People don't necessarily pay attention to it, and then I end up just reading it about it, and people, you know, like Chuck comes in and he you know, we talk about different things that have to do with what's going on in the world, that has to do with what's going on in these articles. So I'm going to go ahead and get off here. Thanks to those who viewed it. Thank you to those who will view it in the future. Like I said, like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell notification. I don't know how much longer I'll be here after December 10th, depending upon what goes on with that. So, all that being said, Shabbat Shalom, and y'all bless you guys. You have a safe weekend. I won't be back until Sunday at 7 p.m. I'll be back. I'll talk about some news that happened on Saturday, since I take Saturdays off. So until then, you guys be safe. Take care of one another, uplift one another, and pray for one another. And by the way, pray for the people that were affected by the shooting in Pensacola, Florida, and the shooting that happened in Pearl Harbor. Pray for the families. Pray for the military involved, all the personnel. You guys keep them in your prayers. And until then, like I say all the time, y'all bless.